never forget what we fought for 100 years. With blood, sweat, broken bones, death and tears. They call us radicals and thugs, but we're just misunderstood. Standing in the same place that my father and my grandfather stood. Respect and honesty.
This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek and Pacifica. And today we're going to look at the struggle going on at Amazon in New York, where workers have been trying to organize, get a contract, and fight for better conditions of the workers at the Amazon warehouse. And joining us is Michelle Nieves, and she is the vice president of the union there. So maybe you can introduce yourself, Michelle, and talk about how you got involved in union organizing at the warehouse there.
Hi, thank you so much, Steve. So I'm a 5-year Amazon worker. So I got involved initially with the union about 2.5 years ago. So I'm one of the original organizers for the election. I'm also a founding officer of the union. So I've been involved internally with the union for a very, very long time. There's those of us that it wasn't really that big of a group. I'd say initially it was maybe 15 of us, and then it turned to like a total of 21 organizers that
got involved. Well, maybe you can talk about the conditions that led you to get involved in organizing at that warehouse.
Oh, the conditions are just horrendous. The conditions are horrendous. I initially got hired by Amazon because I was working at a completely different job. So I was working at a very corporate insurance company, and that insurance company got bought over by another company. So they decided to lay off about 300 workers, and I was just one of those workers that got laid off. I was having a really difficult time getting another job. So that's how I ended up in Amazon in the first place. And the conditions there are just horrendous. It's literally like a modern day plantation. I mean, multiple OSHA violations on every single floor, as far as you can see. Department of Labor violations. Managers interfering with you using the restroom. It's just, I mean,
How did they interfere with you using the restroom?
Well, because they track us according to what we're doing. So when you go into the building, you scan in the building with a badge. And with that badge that has your employee ID number, they can track everything that you're processing or doing because you're doing it underneath that badge. Once you sign in and you scan in, they're tracking all of your scans. So if you leave the station to go use the restroom and you stop scanning, it sends like a little message to the area managers because they're constantly checking people's numbers and people's productivity, and they'll come to the station. Sometimes when you haven't returned to the station yet. So when you return to the station, there's actually a manager there waiting for you, and they'll start questioning you as to why did you leave the station. And it's very, very difficult because it's like the managers don't understand that it's illegal to interfere with the employees using the restroom, right? So if I come back to the station and I say, well, I stopped scanning for 8 minutes because I was using the restroom, the conversation is supposed to end there, but the conversation doesn't end there. They start in where, well, you have a break in about an hour. Is there any way that you can hold off until you go on break? So they give us like this little 15-minute break. It's a paid break, but it's only 15 minutes up to pretty much, I guess everyone's supposed to go use the restroom or grab some water or whatever it is. So the restroom use, the harassment that I received when I was trying to use the restroom was one of the first red flags that I noticed initially when I was first hired, the first few months. I had never been asked about restroom use in any of my other jobs. So this was very shocking to me at that time.
And just to get to the restroom, we're talking about a big building.
Oh, yeah.
And
yes.
I mean, it takes time even to get to the restroom in those kind of warehouses.
Yes. Yeah. So JFK8 is one of the largest facilities in the Amazon network. Apparently it's the size of 3 football fields. If you measure it all the way around. So it is quite a walk to get to the restroom, and even if you walk quickly, it's at least a 4 minute to 5 minute walk just to get to the restroom.
So you're going to end up, if you have to go to the bathroom, you're going to end up spending more time because of the distance even to get to the bathroom.
Exactly.
And even
Exactly.
if you have a break of 15 minutes, that's a problem going to the bathroom.
That's a problem because everyone is using the bathroom at the same time. So especially with the ladies' restroom, there's always a line because everyone goes on their break, and then you have to wait online to use the restroom, and then you have to try and walk back. So technically, you're not taking a break at all. They're just giving you 15 minutes to use the restroom.
And Jeff Bezos, the billionaires that run that, I mean, it seems like inhumane conditions for workers.
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, he's very well aware of it. He's aware of it. Andy Jassy, all of these stockholders that are making millions and millions of dollars off of our labor, they're very well aware of the situations and the environment that we're working in, which is it's a very dangerous and toxic environment. There's also a really high injury rate with Amazon workers. I believe that there was just a story that came out that said that JFK8, this particular warehouse, is one of the most dangerous warehouses in the entire Amazon network.
And
And that story came out like 2 weeks ago.
did you have friends who were injured or workmates who were injured? What happened to them?
So I have several friends and coworkers that have been injured. So usually it's injuries from repetitive motion. So it's the wrist, the rotator cuff in the shoulders, and a lot of sciatic nerve damage, which is in the lower part of your back, from constantly lifting and moving in the same position, lifting the heavy totes, putting down the heavy totes, lifting in a heavy product, putting it onto the conveyor. So when you're doing this for hours and hours at a time, it's usually the repetitive motion injuries that we see. So we did retain a workers' compensation attorney that has been helping, but even, with that, the injury rate just hasn't hasn't improved, unfortunately.
And many of these workers, young workers, they've probably never been in a union. OSHA in New York, the New York State OSHA, when you called them or the people called them, what did they do? Were they inspecting them? Because,
Mhm.
as you say, they have a record, systemic record of health and safety violations. What did OSHA do in New York to protect the workers of the systemic violations of OSHA rules in New York?
Well, I believe that OSHA is fining the company. So they fine Amazon. Also, the Department of Labor has been fining Amazon, but because they're so incredibly wealthy, I don't really think it's making that big of an impact on the company. Also, when OSHA does come to do inspections, they let management know about it. So a lot of times management, 72 hours before the visit is done, they'll do like a walkthrough through the warehouse to try to make sure that everything is up to standards. So once the OSHA representatives get there, a lot of the OSHA violations have already been, pushed under the rug, or they've fixed certain things or make it look in a way that, okay, well, there aren't really any that many OSHA violations here. It looks pretty safe to the human eye. But if they were to come on a day, let's say if OSHA just popped up on a random day, then that's when they would actually see all of the OSHA violations that are actually happening in the facility.
And the governor of New York, governors, Cuomo and the present governor, uh, they could uh, probably urge OSHA directors to actually start having serious investigations of that warehouse if they wanted to.
Yes. Yes. So Governor Hochul, she recently passed a Warehouse Workers Protections Act, that it took a really long time to push the bill. This was I believe it was Jessica Caban. I'm sorry, Tiffany Caban, not Jessica. I'm sorry. I'm confusing her with Jessica Ramos, but Jessica Ramos was involved in it as well, and so was Tiffany Caban, in helping to get this bill pushed forward. But unfortunately, so what Amazon doing is they're pretty much going around the Warehouse Workers Protections Act and trying to figure out a different ways to terminate the workers. So it's multiple issues happening within the facility. So it's the OSHA violations, the Department of Labor violations, and then there's the high termination rate, right? The turnover rate is extremely high. And we're really trying to fight back to help workers to retain their jobs. Unfortunately, when a worker is wrongfully terminated, it just turns into a rabbit hole of financial hardship for this worker and their family, and it just affects the community. So it's really just a combination of multiple things happening at the same time inside of the
And
facility.
they starve the worker out,
Oh,
basically
yes,
starve the worker out.
absolutely. I've been there 5 years, and I am capped out at $22.75. And that's after being with this particular location for 5 years.
And how do you live in New York for $22 an hour?
Well, for me, fortunately, I have a very generous partner. I'm married. I have a generous partner, so we share the bills. So that's how I've been able to survive. To be honest with you, if I was, single, living in an apartment, I would probably be homeless at this point, because I would not be able to pay anything with $22.75 an hour.
And are your members or the workers there in homeless? Are they living in their cars? What is the economic
Um,
situation of the workers?
So there is a population of homeless workers in JFK8. We do have some workers that actually sleep in their cars. There's some workers that sleep in their cars in the parking lot, living out of their cars. We have some that are living with family. We have some that are renting rooms, and you just pay weekly for the room that you're renting. So there's also a housing crisis for these Amazon workers as well, because the pay it just doesn't allow you to be sustainable and to live independently in New York City with the outrageous rents and the cost of living now in New York City. The utilities it's just really, really, really difficult.
And you said it was like working at the plantation. I know in the Tesla plant in Fremont, California, the same words are used by Black workers, other workers, that it's like at the plantation. The conditions,
Mm-hmm.
is that the case? People feel it's like working at a plantation at the plant?
Yes, that's exactly how you feel, like you're working at a plantation. There's no conversation between management and the actual workers. There's no good morning, how are you, good afternoon. They only talk to you if you're going to get a write-up, or if you haven't been making rate. So you're looked at more as a number than an actual human being. And yeah, it absolutely feels like a plantation.
And the discharges, I understand there was a issue of how people are discharged. They're not even informed how they get notice. It's like electronically done. Is that the
Yes.
case? I mean, the treatment of workers?
Yes, that is the case. It's a very impersonal process where sometimes the write-ups are not being communicated with the actual worker, so they don't realize it until an HR rep or HR rep combined with a security guard come to tell you that you're terminated, and then you're escorted out of the building. It's a very traumatizing experience because workers feel like they're being criminalized, especially when you've been working for a company and you've been working very, very hard for 2 or 3 years, and then one day you're just escorted out of the building as if you're some kind of a criminal.
And have you seen that happen to your coworkers?
Yes, yes, I've seen it happen many times, many, many times.
So you decided that you were going to get involved in the union. How did you find out about the union and the union organizing effort?
Well, there was some literature going around, so I first spotted a few pieces of literature in the cafeteria. And then there were a few organizers in my department, and I struck up a conversation with one of the organizers, and then I just started volunteering and showing up to meetings, and that was it. And then after that, I just got really, really deeply involved with organizing and trying to get people to vote to become unionized, so that we can try and fight back and have some type of collective power against management and the Amazon company's leadership and the millionaires and the billionaires that are running the company.
So how long did it take to get a union vote? When did
Well, the whole process itself, I believe, was a little over 2 years. So it actually not 2 years, it was a little over a year. So this is why we were able to win the election, because we were organizing in the building for a little over a year. Some people, can only do this for maybe a few months at a time, because it is very, very grueling. It's 24 hours nonstop organizing on your days off, on your breaks, is extremely physically demanding. And the fact that it was happening in the facility for a little over a year is really the reason why we were able to win that election the way that we did. Also, there was a lot of other organizers that stepped in that were organizing within the departments, and that also helped as well. So there was just a lot of talk going on in the departments, a lot of WhatsApp chats and text messages, and just really, really old-fashioned organizing where, we were handing out literature and newspapers, and just a very, very old-fashioned way of organizing, face-to-face conversations. And it was extremely difficult to do.
and it must have been very stressful.
Yes, it was very stressful. We were completely exhausted. It was a lot of work, a lot of hard work to make that election happen.
And were there other support from other unions in New York to support the effort, or
There
did
were
they help out?
support. Yeah, there were support from the locals, like the rank and file unions in New York, and the local unions were very supporting. They showed up to our rallies, they showed up to protests, they would show up to help hand out literature to the workers. They would come by with snacks and water. They used to come by with water and things like that. They would donate paper to us and ink, because we had no money, we had no resources. We were making all of our literature out of an organizer's HP printer from his house. And it was just very like grassroots organizing. So yeah, we did get a lot of support during the process.
And the organization of the union, they won the election. It was a major development. It was the only Amazon plant in the United States where workers have successfully had a union election and won the election. Uh,
Yes.
how did you organize yourselves as a union after that, or when that process was going on?
So organizing ourselves as a union, it was pretty much the same exact thing. So it was very grassroots. So we just combined everyone's abilities and everyone's capabilities of doing things. So because I had an administration background and I had worked in, corporate offices and stuff, I was appointed to be the recording secretary. So I was the founding officer as the recording secretary. At that time, Connor Spence was the secretary treasurer. Christian Smalls was the interim president, and then Derek Palmer was the interim vice president. Due to their time doing this, so Connor Spence and Derek and Chris had a very, very long history and time of working with each other. So before I got involved, they had already been organizing with each other for over a year, when I started volunteering and organizing.
And you did this organizing committee that you had, your structure, did it meet regularly? How did it meet weekly, or was it
Yes,
how
so
did
we had weekly meetings that were very, very long. So we would meet for like 2 or 3 hours at a time. We were always trying to figure out a way to cut down the meetings to only 1 hour, but we couldn't, because it was just so much work going on and so many issues going on with the workers, with management. And then they flew in a team of union busters to just throw a wrench in everything that we were trying to do. So we would meet weekly at least 2 or 3 hours. I'd say at least twice a week.
And these union busters they flew in, what did they do? Who were they?
So the union busters, I don't know their names off of the top of my head. So I'd say it was about anywhere from 8 to 11 union busters that were flown in. And they would walk around the building, the facility, and they will go to worker stations and talk to them about anti-union propaganda. So why, is the ALU a third party, organization? What are member dues? That the ALU is just trying to get your member dues. They're a business. They're just trying to make money. You should try to work on your relationship with your manager, and your manager can help you at work. You don't need a third party organization such as a union to come in and help you. We were also subjected to captive audience meetings where we were exposed to images and verbiage that were anti-union images and verbiage. We were exposed, I believe, to over 3,000 captive audience meetings in about 1 to 2 months time. So it was extremely aggressive, very strategic anti-union union busting that was coming from Amazon corporate, which is the managers and leadership. So it was all of them combined, and then they would have these union busters that would come in on rotation. So one would cover the day shift, and then one would cover the night shift, and then they had like 3 or 4 of them that were just walking around the entire facility, pretty much on a 24-hour basis.
So this sounds like a major operation they were spending probably millions on to
Oh,
prevent them
yes.
from having a union.
Yes. So later on, we came to find out that I believe they spent about $11.4 million on union busting just on JFK8 alone. So just on our location and our facility, they spent about $11.4 million on union busting.
And they probably write that off as a tax expense.
Exactly.
And their lawyers and everything else. It's all tax deductible.
That's
Busting
right.
unions. When you have a legal right to organize in the United States, you're supposed to have a legal
Yes.
right to join a union.
Yes, exactly. But that's Section 7 of at the NLRB. But a lot of us weren't aware of Section 7. I wasn't even aware of it until I got into this really, really intense war on trying to unionize inside of Amazon. It was a lot of things that I had to learn. So I had to go on the DOL website. I had to go on the NLRB website and see what my rights were, right? And see what I could do and what I could not do in order to get my coworkers to vote for a union. And the amount of our rights, our federal rights that were violated. I mean, I can't even process the amount of times that our federal rights were violated inside of Amazon trying to organize.
And you would think that it would be a criminal conspiracy by Bezos to
Right.
systemically organize to violate the law. That's what he was doing, spending millions of dollars. These criminal, it seems they get away with it. It seems like there are no penalties and they're not charged criminally for conspiring to violate labor laws.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why we were trying to reach out to the governor and the mayor and some political figures inside of New York State, because, New York State is supposed to be a union town, And we were like, well, why is this insane amount of illegal union busting happening in New York? And then it's a massive amount of employees. Like, we're not talking about 200 or 300 people. We're talking about a facility of 8,000 workers. And to us, we went to City Hall numerous times with petitions, just trying to figure out, how we could get people and especially politicians to get involved as to what is happening right now with Amazon and all of these Amazon workers that wanted to fight for a union.
And what did the politicians say? Did they attack the company for violating labor rights and call for an investigation? Did the attorney general investigate? It seems like this flagrant violation should have been called out by these politicians who say enforce the law, you should have a right to organize.
Right, exactly. Unfortunately, no, they didn't really get involved. They did sit with us and we had like multiple interviews. We went to City Hall numerous times to sit down with the staff there. But nothing was done directly. I mean, I feel because Amazon is just so wealthy and so powerful that a lot of politicians just did not want to get involved. I feel like because it was just a messy situation, they didn't want to get their hands dirty at that time. But the lack of support that we received from politicians and influential people was very, very apparent during this whole process. So we knew that there was no cavalry coming. So we were just basically on our own. And that's all we had. We had a few boxes of paper, some pens, some paper clips, and that's it. We had no money, we had no resources, no support, a shoestring budget, and we were still able to do it. But again, I feel that we were able to do it because we were doing it for over a year. So it was a very, very, very long process of trying to organize all of these Amazon workers.
And you finally won the election, and there was a great deal of excitement about working people all over the United States that finally some Amazon workers were able to organize and have a successful election. So
Yes.
that was a big event for workers in this country, and there was the hope that you would actually get a union. But I guess
Yes.
Amazon had different plans.
Yes.
Bezos and Amazon had different plans.
That's right. So we were like the new kids on the block. We were the new kids on the block. It added like a really wonderful spark to the labor movement. A lot of people were inspired. A lot of workers were inspired. So all of these other unions started coming out, or they just started coming out of the woodworks. Like a lot of like Home Depot, Trader Joe's, Starbucks Workers United. I don't want to say that we're like responsible for the labor movement, but a lot of people were inspired by what happened with our election. Unfortunately, yes, the union busting did not stop there. If anything, the union busting got more aggressive. So once we were inside of the facility, those of us that still had access to the building, we were blocked by management every step of the way. So they weren't allowing us to give wine garden rights. They weren't allowing us to represent the workers as a union. I have, several videos and audio recordings with myself and management where I'm trying to step in and intervene to retain a worker's job, a worker that is about to be fired the same day, and management absolutely refuses to speak to me. They refuse to give this worker Weingarten rights. The union busting just continued, and it became, more strategic. I feel as if the managers and HR were under instruction from Amazon corporate, just to not speak to anyone that has anything to do with the Amazon labor union. Don't speak to them. Don't take any documentation from them. Don't sign off on any papers. So it just got increasingly worse. Even with everything that happened, even with all of the unfair labor practices that were filed, there were Division of Human Rights filed. There were constantly complaints being filed with the Department of Labor. Hundreds of complaints were filed, and still there was no movement inside of the facility. Also, there was a huge firing spree that Amazon went on after we won the election. So after we won the election, in the months to follow, Amazon fired hundreds of Amazon workers. And I believe that it was some type of a signal that they were sending to the workers, like, okay, you guys won an election, but if you support this union, you're going to be fired. We're just letting you know. So that was a way of, sending this message to the workers, to please don't get involved with the union because you're going to be fired.
So they're kind of terrorizing the workers. It's interesting because
Absolutely.
at Tesla, Elon Musk plant, workers were moving to join the UAW, have an election, and Elon Musk fired 700 workers.
That's right.
700 workers so that to terrorize the workers and intimidate them and bust the union effort drive by saying, we're just going to get rid of all of you.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's still happening to this day. So a lot of the Amazon organizers have been picked off one by one. So everyone knows that Christian Smalls was fired over 3 years ago. Just recently, I'd say about maybe 2 months ago, Connor Spence was also fired from Amazon. So that's what they're doing. They're just, little by little, one by one, they're going to try to pick off all of the leaders so that there's no one there to actually represent the union inside of the facility.
And seems like it's under Democrats and Republicans. There was no effort of either party to go after Musk and go after the basically massive union busting campaign, violating your democratic rights to have a union.
That's right. That's right. That's
And
exactly right.
so, I mean, basically, they're saying it's okay for Musk, for Bezos, and these people to continue. I mean, I know that at Starbucks, over 300 Starbucks have voted for union, and the company just says we're not going to sign a contract. Period.
Right. Exactly.
We don't care what the vote is.
We don't care what the vote is. We don't care. And to me, I mean, it's just going to take like a massive stop of production in the country. I think that everyone is just going to have to eventually band together and just wake up one day and just refuse to go to work. I think that's what's really really going to take. I'm very very excited to see what UAW is doing, especially the 360 that they've done with their union, with all of the corruption that was happening with their union. And the federal government had to step in, and now they've done like a complete 360, and having the mass strike that they did, and having Joe Biden show up at the strike, which is a historic moment, right? So there are a lot of things happening as far as the labor movement, a progressive labor movement. But me personally, I feel that it's going to take a lot more in
And
order to really,
the Teamsters
yeah.
union, Sean O'Brien, who was elected last year, he said that they were going to make as a priority organizing in Amazon. What was the relationship of the Teamsters locals in New York to support your effort? Did they offer money, hiring halls? How did they try to help you?
Well, the locals and the rank and file, they would try to help with definitely volunteering. I mean, I have no issues with the Teamsters. The rank and file, I know some of them very well. They're very good friends of mine. So they helped with rallies. They showed up to our protests. They've showed up to help us with barbecues and events that we've done with the union. So they have helped out in any way that they can with our organizing. It's pretty much very limited, because if you don't have access to the warehouse, then you're pretty much stuck on the outside. So everything that they're able to do, they have to do it from the outside, because they don't have access to the warehouse to do
And
any organizing in the warehouse.
And I know in California and Palmdale, the subcontractors are joining the union, and the Amazon is firing subcontractors, workers. So they've been
Yes.
targeting them. Is that similar to what's going on in New York?
Yeah.
There-
So what happened, I believe that those are the DSP drivers that were recruited by Teamsters, but it was independent. I believe it was an independent warehouse, and the warehouse's manager is actually pro labor. He's actually pro union. So he agreed to go ahead and affiliate with the Teamsters. So that is why they were able to go ahead and affiliate with the Teamsters, because the manager of the actual location agreed to it, because he was pro union. So that's why they were able to do it. So they didn't have to go through like the humongous fight that we went through, like, with the NLRB and the vicious attacks during the election and all of that. They actually had like a manager that went ahead and said, okay, you guys want to unionize? You want to affiliate with the Teamsters? Go ahead. You have my permission. And that's how they were able to do it at that particular location, which
And
is
do they,
great, which
do
is a
they,
good thing. You know, unions are good.
and so, in the history of organizing in the United States, General Motors and Ford used to be non-union. And
Hmm.
they didn't want the union as well. And in the 1930s, workers had mass mobilizations. They surrounded the plants, thousands, 10,000 workers, and they forced the company to capitulate. In other words, these big auto companies did not want a union. It was forced on them by mass mobilization
Right.
of the entire working class. You think that's the kind of action that's going to be needed at Amazon, these warehouses?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with Amazon, it's just going to have to take a huge collective power from the actual workers. It's going to take a lot of collective power, and either I don't know if a strike is even possible. I'm thinking of a slowdown where it would have to be multiple facilities that strategically slow down their production, right, on direction. Like, let's say if we send out like a mass email, or we do a mass Zoom with these other facilities, and we all agree to do a slowdown of work on a particular day. I think that's something that would be great, and that would actually bring Amazon to the table, because then it would affect their bottom line, it would affect their dollar and their profit. And that is the only thing that Amazon cares about. So once you affect their profit and you affect their dollar, that's what's really going to get them to the table.
And the pilots at Amazon, and they have their own kind of airline, they're all Teamster members. Was there any effort by the pilots, the Teamster pilots, to support this effort?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no. So right now, there is an Amazon Air Hub that is fighting to unionize. So they go by the name KCVG. So this is they're in northern Kentucky, and they are trying to unionize right now. And that air hub, that Amazon Air Hub in northern Kentucky, is actually responsible for 40% of the entire world's air freight. So all of the packages and product that are being sent out on these massive airplanes that are leaving from this air hub, they're responsible for 40% of the world's air freight. So they right now are very, very important part of the Amazon network, because they work at an air hub, and they're right now struggling to unionize. I believe that the leader of their organizing committee was actually just terminated. I think 2 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks or a week ago. His name is Griffin Ritz, and he was actually just terminated by Amazon for organizing for their own union election inside of the facility.
And of course, I don't think most workers at Amazon know that the airline that transports a lot of their product is Teamster organized. You have a Teamster organized airline that's transporting the products at
That's
Amazon.
right. A lot of people don't know that. They don't know.
So
There's a lot going on.
Amazon does have a contract with the Teamsters Union delivering the packages on planes.
Exactly.
You would think that
Yes.
there would be a unified action of Amazon workers in the warehouse and Amazon workers in the air.
Exactly. But there isn't. There isn't. There's this whole segregation and separation of roles, and when it should all be collectively as one. If everyone was together and just move together collectively, it would be so much more easier, and a more of a power move, if we were to be able to get all of these facilities and air hubs and delivery drivers, everybody underneath, one movement, and all on the same page. Then we would really be able to make an impact as far as unionizing the company.
Okay, so let's go back to your union organizing effort. You were the treasurer, and you were meeting weekly. What happened to your union and your union struggle after the election and within the union organizing?
So I was the recording secretary, and then there was an issue that came up with the vice president at that time. So the vice president at that time, Derek Palmer, there was a domestic violence case that was produced against him, and he admitted to strangling his girlfriend on police body cam, unfortunately. So he was asked to resign, and then I was voted in as vice president by the executive board at that time. So those were the changes that happened during that time. And also before all of that happened, there was a constitution and bylaws that was drafted by a legal team, by the Jeannie Myron legal team. And one of the lawyers in the legal team, her name is Ritu Singla. She's the one who drafted the constitution and bylaws that a lot of people were not in agreement with. So this constitution and bylaws led to a lot of disagreements and infighting within the organization. And it was all about the date of the elections. Some of the organizers wanted to push forward with the contract fight because Amazon is so aggressive with their union busting. Some of the organizers wanted to force the elections and have the elections and then go forward with the contract fight. So that's where a lot of the disagreements and the infighting started, is with the Constitution and bylaws.
And did you ever pass a constitution?
Yes, so we passed the Constitution and bylaws. So the current Constitution and bylaws that we have said that we were going to go ahead with the contract fight and try and obtain a CBA, and then go ahead with the elections, because elections, I mean, technically elections are every 3 years anyway. And that's across the board, like with any union. Usually the elections are every 3 years. So a lot of organizers were not in agreement with that. So a lot of people resigned. They walked out when the Constitution and bylaws was introduced. So they went ahead and just resigned, stopped organizing with the union. We did not hear anything from this particular group of people for about 6 months. Then after 6 months' time, they went ahead and introduced themselves as the Amazon Labor Union Reform Caucus. And they came out as a group, as a caucus within the membership of the Amazon Labor Union. And then shortly after that, I was then given information that they were actually going to take the union to federal court. And on top of taking the union to federal court, they went ahead and retained Arthur Schwartz. And if you're not familiar with Arthur Schwartz, then you would have to look him up online. Many people are already aware of Arthur Schwartz and his history with the membership of certain unions. So
And
not the leadership, but the membership.
what was Arthur Schwartz's role in your union?
So Arthur Schwartz was retained by the Amazon Labor Union Reform Caucus. So I have no relationship with Arthur Schwartz. He was retained by that caucus, by that group of people.
And what did he do? What role did he play in the this internal union struggle?
Well, the role that he played is pretty much when they went to a federal court, or when they dragged the union to federal court. Now Arthur Schwartz was able to present the case, right? Because I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not really good with legal terms and all that stuff. But he was able to present a case that would force the elections. So they wanted to override the Constitution and bylaws that called for the contract fight first, right? And then elections later on. And Arthur Schwartz produced the case that he wanted to force the elections now and then deal with the contract fight later on. So he wanted to override the Constitution and bylaws, stating that it was undemocratic and that they wanted to force elections now, pretty much.
And so this internal struggle, must have been very problematic. And
Oh yeah, it was
as far as
vicious.
organizing.
Yes, it was vicious. It led to a huge division inside of the facility. Again, there were no internal exhaustion of remedies, right? So we did not receive an email or a text message or a phone call from this caucus to try to at least exhaust internal remedies before this federal lawsuit was produced, right? And this is actually in the Constitution, where You have to at least try to exhaust the internal remedies first. So it led to a huge division inside of the warehouse, a lot of infighting. It was almost impossible for us to organize and recruit within the warehouse because it was just so much confusion and disagreements. Some of the workers want the contract now. They don't understand why the contract fight isn't happening. Some of the workers want elections now. Some of them don't. Some of them are not interested in elections until they get a contract. I mean, it's just so much division and confusion happening within the facility.
And what happened to this group? The focus is not towards organizing and get a contract. It seems like the focus is different groups fighting each other in the union.
Yes. Yeah. So pretty much it just turned into, I think to me personally, it's turned more into a power struggle as to who is going to be leading the Amazon labor union, right? So it's who is going to be in leadership, who's going to be the 4 officers of the union, which is president, vice president, recording secretary, and secretary treasurer. So to me, it's not about the membership anymore. Somehow, along the way, the membership and the workers have been lost in this entire thing. And it's turned more into an ego, a power of egos and just a power struggle as to who is going to be leading the union. The fact that, these officer roles are supposed to be a roles of service. We're supposed to be serving the membership, and we're obligated as officers to serve the membership, and to uphold the Constitution and bylaws, and just treat everyone in a fair and democratic and unbiased way. I feel like all of that stuff has just gone out the window, and it's just turned into a very, very vicious fight amongst the two groups. And unfortunately, the ones that are paying for it now are the workers of JFK8 and all of the Amazon workers in the United States that are watching this whole thing go down. And that there's a lot of people depending on this warehouse to try and make it through, right? Because if we make it through, then it will be easier for all of these other locations, like let's say KCVG, the air hub that want to unionize. It would be so much more easier for them to unionize once they see us being successful in getting a contract or CBA from Amazon. But unfortunately, with all of this infighting, I don't see how that's possible. Also, there's a mass conspiracy happening within the organization, which is a suppressive dissent that is happening. There's a lot of complacency with suppressive dissent. I myself have confronted Christian Smalls on many occasions. We have our director of grievance and discipline who filed charges against Christian Smalls for the neglect of the Amazon labor union and the neglect of the day-to-day operations of the union. And he was actually illegally fired from his position as director of grievance and discipline in an action of suppressive dissent. So at this point, anyone who is involved in the complicity of the action of suppressive dissent should be disqualified from running for an officer position within the union. And that includes myself. This goes for everyone.
And suppressive dissent, what is exactly that term, and what does that mean?
Well, the suppressive dissent is, let's say if you're an officer of the union and you see misallocation of funds, and as an officer of the union, you go ahead and you report it to the other 3 officers. Let's say there's 4 of you, and one of them reports it to the other officers and say, hey, listen, I spotted some misallocation of funds. And I want to start an audit and I want to start an investigation to what is happening with these funds. If these 3 other officers conspire against the one officer who wants to go ahead and report the misallocation of funds, that is a suppressive dissent.
And the funding that you were getting, do members pay dues? How are your contributions? How are you getting contributions to the union? And where's the funding coming from?
So right now, a huge majority of the funding that we have received was mostly through donations. So the Constitution and bylaws called for voluntary member dues, which I am not in agreement with. I think that member dues should be enforced. And the reason why is because member dues are powerful. They give power to the membership. And this way, if the membership are paying their member dues, they're able to come forward and hold officers accountable when they are not performing their roles and their obligations to the union. So, the voluntary member dues to me was a very, very big mistake. Also, the union surviving off of donations is not sustainable because, again, donations are not guaranteed. We could get a donation, we could not get a donation, right? And you can't run a union just off of donations. It's just not sustainable. It's not realistic. It doesn't work for the long term. So the fact that, the member dues are still at voluntary member dues has also caused a really, really big problem for the union's finances as well.
And the finances, how many members of the union are there at your warehouse?
So now I believe after peak season, I believe it's possibly over a little over 7,000 members.
And membership means that the dues are voluntary, not mandatory.
Yes. It means that the dues are voluntary, not mandatory. I myself with a group of others within the organization, we're trying to have the Constitution and bylaws amended. And we were met with resistance from the legal team. So the legal team, Jeannie Myron and Ritu Singla, were telling the officers and certain other representatives of the union that we could actually not amend the Constitution, which I find to be outrageous, right? Because the labor lawyers are retained by the union. So the labor lawyers work for the union. So for a labor lawyer to tell an officer of the union or organizer or worker that you're not allowed to amend your own Constitution and bylaws, I mean, that's just outrageous.
And why do you think they're saying that?
I honestly, I think maybe it's to just keep maybe Christian Smalls in the forefront and keep Christian Smalls in the position of power that he has right now. And just basically to protect, their firm.
And Christian Smalls is well known nationally. He's come to California. He spoke when the longshore workers went out on Juneteenth at their rally. He's come to the California AFL-CIO convention. Does he make a report to the leadership or the membership about his activities around the country?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So Christian Smalls, basically Christian Smalls is only concerned with Christian Smalls. He does not really communicate with the union or the members or the other officers as to his whereabouts. He's constantly traveling, I say 99.9% of the time. He signed up for the Speakers Bureau, and that has taken precedent over the union and over the membership of the union, which is extremely it's just an extreme act of neglect of the union and its membership. So the workers have no access to Christian Smalls. They do not see Christian Smalls. He doesn't do like any statements. There's no communication to the membership at large. So there's a huge disconnect between Christian Smalls and the rank and file membership in JFK8. And it's a very, very big problem. At this point, I feel that Christian Smalls should just really just focus on himself and basically stepping down as president of the Amazon Labor Union and just letting whatever leaders come forward and continue to do the work. And he can just continue traveling and speaking for the Speakers Bureau and doing whatever else it is that he's doing with his time.
It seems you need a president who's going to be responsible for members and focus on getting that plant organized, having
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We need leadership that are really, really committed to the membership, to the rank and file membership. I also feel that anyone that is a leader should actively be employed by Amazon. It's very difficult to organize and to have communications with the membership at large when you don't have access to the building. So also being employed by Amazon is something that is very, very important because you have to be amongst the membership in order to lead them, right? You can't just be on another planet in another world and then trying to lead a facility of 8,000 workers. It's just not going to happen.
And how many organizers have been fired by Amazon at your plant?
I'd say at least at over the years, I'd say at least a dozen. At least a dozen over the years.
So they've targeted, and have any workers gotten their jobs back who were fired for organizing?
Um no, no, not that I
So
not that
Amazon
I
has
know of.
basically been successful in illegally firing union organizers, and they haven't been able to get their jobs back.
Right, right.
So what does that say about the labor laws in this country and the enforcement of the labor laws?
It says that the labor laws have to be updated. I think they're very outdated, especially because the world is changing. With technology, the mass influx of technology that we have now, now they're introducing artificial intelligence and all of these different things as far as technology. I feel the labor laws are extremely outdated. They need to be updated. There needs to be some new bills passed. These corporations have to be held accountable. There has to be some type of a way to audit these corporations and just hold them responsible for the damage that they're doing to the workforce in the United States.
And what kind of effect has AI and robotics had at your factory, at your warehouse?
Well, at the warehouse, the technology and the AI and robotics affects us because they're constantly tracking everything that we're doing. Also, I believe that they are trying to replace some of the positions with some kind of robots that move the product. And that is a way of just replacing an actual human being with a robot. And, that robot doesn't get sick. That robot doesn't need paid time off. That robot doesn't need to go on vacation. So they're taking away like the human aspect of the workforce and trying to replace it with robots. And then, what happens to all of these workers that are no longer needed and no longer required, right? So then it just adds to the chaos and the problems that we have with the workforce in the United States and being able to retain a sustainable long-term employment uh with any company.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with Michelle Nieves. She is the Vice President of Amazon Labor Union. And she's been talking about the history of organizing there, the conditions at the warehouse, and the continuing struggle for union rights and also for union democracy to have membership control of the union, and the importance of that for workers, not just at Amazon and other Amazons, but for workers in this country.
Yes, thank you so much.